Hello and welcome to Casually Profound. I'm Lauren McLean. I am an astrologer, soul communicator, and artist here to talk to you about how I experience living life from a spiritual lens. Today is another solo episode, and I was just sitting with the void today and felt this come through, and so I wanted to hit record while the idea was present with me. So please enjoy this live rant. It's not a rant, it's a story. I'd like to invite you to listen to a story with me, if you would enjoy to do that. So today's story is about creativity. So many of us identify as creative people, and we really strive to show that creativity to the world. And the fun thing about being human is that we have defined boxes of what creativity is supposed to look like, which is convenient for some because when you have a box or a set of rules or a set of restrictions to follow, that creates a unique type of tension that is excellent for manifesting art out of. Art and creativity really can be a beautiful exercise to understand the tension between you and the world around you. And so when we think of commercial artists and we think of people who are creating art and are in a space where that is bringing in a lot of money, there is a beautiful thing that happens there where you are being reciprocated for bringing life for creation, for bringing to life ideas that exist only in your mind. And I will say I have been an artist for most of my life. That's a dumb statement. I have been an artist my entire life. From the time I could hold a pen or a crayon, I should say, I have been able to create worlds easily through speaking, through writing, through drawing, through Barbies, like whatever the thing was. It has been easy and effortless for me to create and bring into fruition these worlds that I see in my head. And somewhere along the way in my life, I devalued that skill. And I thought that it was only useful in the context of building a business or creating an accounting spreadsheet or putting together an instruction manual or learning a new skill. And so that ability to visualize and translate and bring into life was really only about learning. I really put the focus on learning. And so when I sit with the void and when I feel like I'm getting myself sidetracked. I want to really zero in on this facet of so in my life, I know that I had that innate capability of being an artist. Not only have other people told me this about myself, I have witnessed the pieces that I created as a small child. And there's majesty in them. There is a level of understanding in them, even if the representations were not always there, when I was a small child. And then as I got into, there was just so much evidence in these pieces of whether it was like the pumpkin you made at art class in fucking kindergarten or whatever was going on. There was just so much evidence that I was able to see and think of things beyond what was just on the paper. And so then as I got a little bit older and to that like early teens or teenage years, I started drawing and doing more art and stuff, and both for personal enjoyment and in like art classes in school. And something that I didn't know at the time, but I was told later what I had done, I had bought a couple of books on how to draw people and how to do graphic design and that kind of thing. And I remember flipping through the pages of the books, I don't actually remember reading the books. There was one on how to draw manga that I know that I like read and followed and that kind of thing. But there's a couple others that I remember the pictures, I remember the books, but I don't know what happened in them. And I became better at drawing. I became better at drawing people. I became better at all that kind of thing. And what I realized afterwards, I'm going to explain the other tangent first. So also with makeup was something that I was very good at. I started doing my own makeup in earnest in grade 8 or 9. I started wearing makeup every day and quickly became proficient at it and had a very definite style. And then after high school, I had a lot of people asking me to do their makeup and people were always blown away. I mean, I've done makeup for people in settings where there's other people around who've had their makeup done by professional makeup artists, and the stuff that I've done is better and objectively. And so what I explain this to say that I thought that I learned that from reading magazines, and I was fact-checked by my sister that she went back and looked at the magazines I told her I learned makeup from, and she said she went and looked in the magazines that I owned, and there was no makeup tips in there. There was no instructions on what I was doing. It had just come out of me. And so thinking back to these magazines I thought I read and the books that I know that I read, there was some kind of download happening in me without understanding that it was happening, how to express myself through these different mediums. And that there was always this conscious flow between art and the art that existed in my mind and the continuous flow of it out through my body. And so then after that point, after high school, after, these first few years of makeup and stuff like that, those examples, I got into college and I got into business college, which I loved. I am super grateful for that experience. And my mind in that process became so, I would call it thinking in a box. My thoughts and my direction and all that stuff got really oriented towards a linear way of thinking, which is extremely useful because I also, as much as I have this space to channel and embody and transmute these artistic, esoteric, and intangible concepts into everyday life, I also have an extraordinarily linear way of operating in my brain. I have mental spreadsheets for things. I've had jobs, I'm in retail, where people would consult me before they would consult the computer because I knew off the top of my head where all the inventory was and the orders were and our warehouse and stuff was. I had just an extraordinary capacity to keep track of data points. And so being trained to use this linear mind in order to function at high capacity through something like schooling and through different jobs and stuff that I had was extremely useful. And it also took me far away from that innate, somebody's telling me that that's not entirely true. It just showed me a different facet of how it showed me a different facet of how I can pull information from the ether and into reality, right? Instead of going with a box of crayons, you can come in with an Excel spreadsheet. And it's the same matter of taking what is formless, putting it through a structure and giving an idea life and breathing life into places where nothing previously existed. That is the creative process. All of this to say that in society, we value that form of thinking more when our structure is clear and crisp and exists in pixels and frames and a nice little matrix. That is the form of creation and creativity that is often valued. And now I used the example at the beginning of commercial artists who are, I can think of like people, like an artist who has pieces in a gallery and is selling a piece for like $30,000 and stuff like that. It would be very easy to argue that they are not existing in when they're creating that art. They're not existing in a place where they're plugging their ideas into a linear structure in order to give their ideas form. That could be argued. And yet, the component that was coming to me while I was in the void today was that I had seen creativity as either this formless download of things that are unseen and I don't understand where they come from, or on the complete other end of the spectrum, I had been seeing creativity as this thing that comes through structures and cells and defined methods of transmuting things. Excel spreadsheet over here, business or makeup. Those are on two ends of the spectrum for me. But there are many other things that could exist in those two categories. So feel free to use your own categories with that. For me, it was my ability to do makeup that came from seemingly nowhere, and the ability to draw and like download information from books without having to read the books. The one graphic design book I literally just like held and kind of flipped through. I know I never read it, but somehow I could do graphic design afterwards. So this like downloading things, or this like business spreadsheets form building creativity form over here. That was what I perceived as these two ends of the spectrum. And then what has been coming to me in the last few days and just kind of crystallized as I was sitting on the toilet right before I recorded this was that there is a large spectrum of the creative life force that flows through all of us that exists in the space between those two places. And one might think, well, duh, if it's a spectrum, there's obviously stuff in the middle. Congratulations. Yes, we have found basic logic. The question that I often pose to myself is, how in the fuck does one access that? Because what is it? What is the middle space? If not flowy, lovey-dovey, wonderful, pretty things, or structured, linear, corporate things. What is the middle? And I'm not 100% clear on how I know this, but I'm certain that the thing that fills the middle and sides and ends and around that spectrum is your sense of self, is my sense of self. And I know this. Actually, I do know how I know this. Let me explain it to you. If you'd like to hear the story, I'd be happy to share it with you. The way that I know that my sense of self is the larger portion of creativity that I am only now at 30 beginning to tap into is that the more that I recognize that the spreadsheet is the same as the shading brush I use for my eyeshadow, and that the paintbrush is the same as the novel outline that I use to track my character development in my book, the more that I realize that all of these tools are the whetstone on which I sharpen the blade of my authentic self. And that every time I engage in any of these modalities, no matter where they end up on the spectrum that I have created for myself in my own mind, is whenever I engage in any of these tools and modalities, I'm giving myself an opportunity to experience myself in the fullest and most complete way possible. And this exists with people. This exists with any situation that you exist in your life. And I want to think about this specifically in terms of creativity, because what in the projects that I've been pursuing in the last little while, I've realized how much they pull the different facets of me together into one place where I am able to experience this thing that is just larger and easier to manage than any of these individual facets have been on their own. There's something about only looking at a spreadsheet that makes me a little bit crazy. There's something about only working in shades of color on a painting that drives me a fucking crazy. There's something about only writing that makes me a little bit crazy. But because when I am hitting the same note every single time, or when I'm using the same key for one whole piece, I'm only accessing one part of myself. I thought about this the other day with the guys who pick up garbage. I was thinking about the garbage men and how our society has created structures where individuals are relegated to repeat the same task over and over again. And when we lived in a tribe or a community system where individuals had more varied responsibilities to care for themselves in the community. Our communities were smaller, our communities were simpler, and they were less efficient. We consolidated roles to make community more efficient, both cost-wise, time-wise, all that kind of thing. And so there was a trade-off in that. And so I think the trade-off with creativity, with authentic creativity, is that we consolidate our selves into one medium or another medium in order to become efficient at it. A painter is a painter and will paint for their entire lives because they want to become a master at painting. And the trade-off is that while that person is focused on the skill of painting, I'll use myself as an example so that I'm not projecting this onto anyone. If I was to dedicate myself solely to my painting, yes, I could absolutely become a master at painting. Every time I lift a paintbrush, I can feel that capacity within myself. However, and the same exists when I'm editing a video or creating a video piece of art. I can feel that I have the capacity to become a master at editing video. However, what I am seeking as an artist is actually the full, authentic expression of myself. And not just, self-expression. I find self-expression can be a little bit self-indulgent. And that's not quite it's self-indulgent and it's selfish, but it's like annoyingly selfish. I'm all here for selfishness. I love selfishness. And there's something about simply wanting to express yourself through art that feels one-dimensional to me, and I want it to be like 7, 8, 9-dimensional. And so when I am practicing one medium of art and I am expressing one facet of myself and I am mastering an action, it feels that narrow self-expression that feels self-indulgent and selfish. However, when I embark on creativity from a place where I am expressing my authentic whole self, as whole as I can know myself to be in the moment that I am in, I am accessing far, 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 far more than just a paint on a canvas or a pen on a notebook or a mouse in a program. I am accessing all of those things and more. When I unleash the whole capacity for the million data points my brain is able to access, and I unleash the ability to look at the form and the contracts and the structure, and I unleash my ability to look at the tone and the shape and the quality of the light in a project, and when I unleash my ability to look into the ether and to pull out this formless thing and transmute it and translate it and bring it into reality, that is my creative force. That is creativity for me. And that is far more I'm not just mastering a medium or mediums. I'm mastering life. I'm mastering myself. I am mastering the art of being me. Lauren McLean. And that creative force comes through differently, I believe, for every person. You know, for me, it was makeup and spreadsheets that really like highlighted the spectrum and then this negative space in and around the spectrum. However, I also know that like dirt biking lives on that spectrum somewhere, and fucking, I don't know, car racing lives on that spectrum, and like alcoholism lives on that spectrum, and like naturopathic stuff lives on that spectrum, right? It's all expressions of yourself. And so that creativity is not merely the act of making a pretty picture or making a movie or making a podcast. Those are all fabulous and fun and expressive and enjoyable activities to do. And I applaud anyone, including myself, for putting those things out into the world, because let's face it, it is fucking scary to put part of your expressive self out into the world, even if it's only 1/10 of who you could truly be in that moment. It's worth celebrating. It's worth going for. And I also want to challenge everyone to think of your creative life force, to think of the creativity that you exercise in order to express how you're feeling, express yourself, engage in your true nature. I would challenge you to think about it with every cell in your body, to access all of those parts of you, to make the connection and build the web of what exists on your spectrum, and to use the negative space of that spectrum in order to connect to the bigger thing that is wanting to come through you. Because that is fucking life, baby. That is fucking life. Fuck. Yeah. Man. Yeah. I'm blowing my own mind right now. I hope y'all enjoyed this. I think the short version of, I think I just gave you the short version. I don't even know. Yeah, this is it. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you enjoyed embarking on this version of creativity and life and love with me. And I hope that you enjoyed me. I hope that you join me again next week. Solo episodes are going to be coming out on Tuesdays, and party episodes are going to be coming out on Thursdays. If you would like to join these conversations, please send me a message at Casually Profound on Instagram, and we will see you next time.